Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Sasha Reed, and I'm one of the design team members for WOW. Today I'm going to be sharing with you two different fun ways to use colored embossing powders and give a nice range of color to your project. For one of my projects I'm going to use an embossing pen, and for the other I'm going to use a stencil and an ink pad. Now these two embossing powders are the star of my show today. They are the new super fine embossing powders and they are so gorgeous. You will see how well they work by the end of this video. I'm super impressed with them. I really love them. To start off, I'm going to cut myself two card bases. So I'm going to cut it down the middle there at 10.5 to give myself two top folding note cards. Now it's really important to remember your anti-static powder tool, whatever you may have, if you've just got cornstarch or corn flour, or if you've got a little baggie like this, or if you've got one of those little brush doodads, whatever you've got, make sure you use it, because otherwise you will end up with embossing powder sticking all over your card where you don't want it to go. Now I'm using some of this mint tape from scrapbook.com. It's a really nice low tack tape that lifts really nicely and doesn't leave any residue or tear my cardstock. Put that tape down to hold my stencil in place and also cover up areas where I don't want the ink to go. And all I'm going to do is use a gentle kind of squishing motion, a little bit of a rub with my ink pad directly onto that stencil to really get it nice and through all those holes. So I lift it up here and peel off the tape. You can see I've got lots of embossing ink onto my cardstock and none where I didn't want it. For this first card, we're going to do a nice mix of colors, and the way that I like to achieve this is to gently sprinkle on in random places some of the colors, dump it off, and then sprinkle on your next color. You'll see what I mean as I'm going here. So I've done that first color, and I'm going to make sure I put away, tip off all the excess, and put it straight in the jar, put the lid on so I don't knock it, so I don't make a mess. And then I'm going to add on my second color. Now as long as you give it a nice firm tap from behind, you're not going to get any of that residue from the first color transferring into your second color. So here you can see I flick it off quite firmly, and I dump it back in the pot, and I'm not getting any of my colors mixing in. This is a great way to add lots of multiple colors to your project, but not have them mix into one big nasty bundle of messy color. So as long as you do one color at a time, give it a firm flick, then you can get rid of that color and not have it mixed in with any other colors, but your project will look very beautifully mixed. So when that's all done and you've tidied your powders away, you can go ahead and grab your heat gun. I have the WOW one, which has a dual speed, so I like to put it on number 1, so it's less air just as much heat, and then that way none of my embossing powder blows off. So here you can see you get this blend of colors. I've used all three and you get a gorgeous little ombre kind of look. Now this is the Magic Maker. It's the super fine embossing powder, which I know is new in WOW's shop, and it is really lovely stuff. I will do my best to link everything I can down below for you in the description box. Sometimes I forget things, so just drop a little comment and hopefully I'll notice it and I'll be able to pop on in there and give you the link to whatever I've forgotten. Now the great thing about this stencil is it leaves you that nice blank space in the middle, so you can easily make this a one-layer card and not have to have too much bulk to your card. Now the stamp set I wanted to use, which was from WOW, didn't have a happy small enough for me to fit in that nice little hexagon middle, so I found a different happy from Trinity Stamps, which I'm going to use instead, and then the birthday from the WOW stamp set. Now again, don't forget to use your anti-static powder tool. You want to make sure that you get all the static off of there, because now we're going to add another embossing powder and we don't want that to then stick to any of the beautiful area that we've already created. So I'm just going to tap my ink pad onto my words, double check that it's got a nice good layer of ink on there, and then I can go ahead and sprinkle on my ultra fine embossing powder or super fine embossing powder, and look at that, like not a detail missed. It is so gorgeous. I'm really pleased and really impressed with this super fine embossing powder. These are tiny thin letters and they've come out crystal clear. Couldn't be happier. It's just got that wow factor, which I guess maybe that's why they call it WOW embossing powder. I'm not sure, but I love it. I thought it was so gorgeous. Now the next project is dead similar to a video I did on my YouTube channel last week, so if you're not a subscriber over there, do head over and check it out. I do a lot of tutorials on there as well. I aim to do a lot of technique based tutorials, so if you like the content that I'm doing for WOW, you might like my personal YouTube as well. I'll put the link down below in the description box for you. So I've punched out a circle out of paper using just a circle punch from my stash, and then I'm taking some low tack repositionable adhesive from scrapbook.com. and just sticking that circle down in the middle. And all I'm using that circle for is kind of like a base so that I know where I'm doing my lines from. And all we're going to do now is just draw lines using our embossing pen. And I'm going to do lines one color at a time. So this means I can control my colors again, and I don't end up mixing my colors, and I get really cute little lines of each individual color. So I've gone ahead and drawn on some lines. I'll sprinkle on some embossing powder, give it a good tap off. Now the only downside is the pen isn't quite as juicy as the ink pad, so you will see at the end of this tutorial I do add some more lines on top of my lines to get that extra layer of embossing. You could heat set in between, but I've used my anti-static powder bag and I've gone ahead and made that all nice and not staticky. So I am just doing each color as I go, and then I will heat set the whole thing in one go at the end, and that just saves me some time. So when I'm satisfied with how many lines I've got put down on my cardstock, I then go ahead and get my gun and heat set it. Now I made the error here, I wanted to lift this up so I didn't make a mess when I was heat setting and heat set powder where I didn't want it to go, but when I pulled that off I accidentally kind of touched those bottom edges, so I do have to then add on my embossing powder, but because I was doing a couple of those lines over again, it didn't really matter. I just took my pen, colored over the top again, and added in that embossing powder. So once it's all heat set, you can see some of them aren't quite as dark as I wanted, so I'm just going to make sure I use that static powder bag again, and then take my pen and just draw over the lines and make sure I just do one color at a time again. And then that way I get nice, deep, dark lines, and they do look a bit wonky because I can't draw a straight line to save my life, but that's fine. It's a handmade, homemade card, and I think it adds a bit of a fun, creative look to the card when it's not quite so perfect with all those lines. So again, I'm just touching up some of those lines in each of those individual colors. Really didn't take long at all. It's a nice, quick and easy project, which is great for all ages and stages. So this is something you could do in the summer holidays if you're in a country that's got the summer holidays right now. In the UK, our kids are now all off from school. This is a great project you can do with them. You just give them a pen, let them draw on the lines and put in some embossing colors, and it's quite a fun little family project you could do together. When I'm done all that, I take a clean piece of white cardstock, punch my circle out, and this time I did 2 circles because I wanted to show you 2 different ways that you could kind of add your sentiment on there. Now originally I punched out the exact same size of circle and then realized I really want to use this happy and it is not quite big enough, so I went ahead and punched out a circle that was just slightly bigger so that I could fit that whole sentiment, that happy, right there on the middle of my circle. I'm using a stamp platform just to make sure that if I need to stamp it a second time, I can stamp it exactly in the same place. And also if I wanted to do multiple cards, I could then line them up and have them all ready to go. And here's my first sentiment version, which I decided not to use in the end. This is a nice clean cut version. The second version I decided to go for more of a textured edge, and I'm taking my embossing ink pad and just kind of dragging it across the edges. It's really difficult to see because obviously it's clear and see-through, but I'm going to add my embossing powder on there now and you'll start to see the sort of kind of messy edge. Originally I was going to use those tweezers, but it really didn't work out. Now, if you don't like the pattern on it, you can take a paintbrush, a dry, clean paintbrush, and you can just kind of dust off edges where you maybe got too thick or too much. You can add back on some embossing powder if you took too much off with your paintbrush. You can have a nice little play and you can get a really cute creative edge to it. So this is what it looks like when it's all melted, and I'm sorry the camera's not quite central here. I kind of forgot where I needed to put my hands. Here it is all done with a nice little sentiment popped on the front, again using that super fine embossing powder. So 2 totally different looks, and I felt like the one on the right went a lot better with my wonky lines. I kind of felt like the sort of wonky edge complemented the wonky lines, whereas I felt like that was really beautiful and clean and cut, but it didn't quite work for my card. So this is the winner in the end. So now we can go ahead and assemble the card together. I want this sentiment to pop up off my card, so I'm going to use some little sticky back foam dimensionals, and then to add a bit more texture to the background but not take away or make those lines any crazier, I'm going to use some metallic thread from my stash. So I've got almost every color of this metallic thread and I love it. It is a great way to add a little bit more oomph to your card without actually having too much more bulk or too much more chaos going on. So I like a messy bunch of threads. I just stick that right on the back of those foam squares and then I can pop that straight down on my card, and then I've got a little bit more interest in texture without it being too overwhelming. Now I decided I wanted to take some of my acrylic pens and just fill in that happy and go with a sort of purpley pink theme and tie that together. Now to get that pen to kind of tie into the background without it making it look like it's kind of standing out too much, I decided to do some splatters. Because it is an acrylic paint pen, I can just splatter the ink all down around the background. And that gives me my second card all finished and done. Hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. So take care and have a great week ahead. Bye!